Gosh, lots of people there suddenly.
Hello to all. We have today with us Chris Croft. Mr. Chris Croft has come from an engineering background with a master's degree from Cambridge University, qualifying as a chartered engineer and working as a senior manager in manufacturing for 10 years. He gained an MBA and worked as a university lecturer for 4 years before starting his own training company 25 years ago. His course, Project Management Simplified, on LinkedIn Learning, is the most viewed project management course in the world, with 2,000 views per day and over 1 million views in total. Also, there is his book on project management, The Quick Start Guide, and there are his internet site, which we will share with you at the chat, and you can visit it if you want, of course. And you can add him at LinkedIn.
Right,
That's
great.
all from us.
So more or less, we just need an event by itself to present the achievements of Mr. Croft. Rich,
Yeah, that was a
huge
long
pleasure
list.
having you here. Yeah, that's a long list. Yeah, thank you so much for being here today. And actually, what I said when we were in person, I'm gonna say that again. I'm looking forward to understand what I'm doing wrong, because I'm doing wrong for sure, because there are two things that everybody's doing wrong. So I for sure belong in this community. So looking forward to hear from you. All right, so the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you, Achilles. Yes, Achilles is doing two things wrong in his project planning, I think. So, and thank you to George for inviting me as well. This is I've wanted to do this talk for a long time, actually, because I've been teaching project management, and most of it I love. Gantt charts are great, all these critical paths, great. But I think there are two things that you get taught that are not right. And I'm going to claim that every book in the world, except for mine, is wrong, right? Every book except for my little book is wrong. And I'm going to try and persuade you about that. So I hope you find this interesting. If you know quite a lot about project management, I hope this will still be new. And if you know nothing about project management, then I hope this will also be really useful. And hello to everybody who's saying hello, by the way. It's so great. I wish I was actually in Greece, because I'm stuck here in England where, it rains all the time and we can't see the sea. But anyway, I hope you like it. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is contingency, right? How much safety margin do you add? And after that, I'm going to come to something called schedule performance, but we'll start with contingency. So I want you to imagine, let's suppose you're doing a car journey, and it normally takes about 2 hours to drive this journey. All right. And let's suppose that the worst case, sometimes it takes 4 hours. And occasionally, if you're very lucky, you can do it in 1 hour. Maybe if you're driving in the middle of the night, or you're overtaking in a slightly dangerous way, you could do it in 1 hour. So, and let's suppose that you record, every time you do the journey, you record it in a little book, which, by the way, I used to do before I had SatNav. I used to record my journey times in a little book. I don't do that anymore. And suppose that you fed all the times into an Excel spreadsheet and made a graph. What shape would the graph be? And I think it would probably be like this. So most of your journeys will be taking around the 2 hours plus or minus 15 minutes, maybe. Luckily, we don't often get the journey from hell. It's very rare that everything is bad, every traffic light is red. And similarly, unfortunately, we don't often get the perfect journey where every traffic light is green. We tend to get about half and half. Okay, so projects will be the same. So this could be how many months it takes to do your project, or maybe years. And there could be different numbers, but in principle, this could be how many years. And by the way, this can be money as well. This could be thousands of euros as well. So you expect the project to take 2,000, to cost 2,000, but it might cost as much as 4,000 if it goes really badly. And if it goes really well, maybe it would cost only 1,000. Okay, so it could be time, and it can be money. But the question we have is, what do we tell the customer? What do we promise the customer? When the customer says, when will you finish your journey? Do we say 2 hours or 1 or 4 or what? Now, there are a number of choices. And the first choice is to quote the average. So we could just say, I'll be there in 2 hours. The average. But if you quote the average, you will be late half the time. So you don't want to quote the average for your project, because if you do that, 50% of your projects will be late. And I know 50% will be early, but that's no good, because you can't say to a customer, sorry, Achilles, that your project was late, but George's was early. Doesn't make Achilles happy, does it? So we don't want half of our customers to be unhappy. So that's the first thing, don't quote the average. Now, that's not the worst thing to promise the customer. The worst thing to promise them would be 1 hour. You would be crazy, you would be mad to promise 1 hour. If you say to the customer, I might be able to do it in 1 hour, they'll hear 1 hour, and you are now absolutely certain to be late. Even if you do it in 1.5, they're still going to be unhappy. And sometimes people do quote 1 hour. Maybe salespeople quote that number to sell the job, to get the job. Or sometimes your boss will say, if it goes really well, how quickly might I get the project? And like a fool, you tell them the truth. And you say, well, if everything works first time and nobody is sick, we could maybe do it in 1 hour or 1 week or 1 month or whatever. And the customer, your boss, just hears 1. So now you're doomed. Okay, so clearly we must never say that. That would be a bad idea. Now, it would be nice to promise them 4 hours. Because if we say I'll be there in 4 hours, we can definitely do it. But the problem is you'll never sell anything if you promise the absolute worst case. And also your boss won't believe you. Imagine I was driving home to my wife and I said, I'll be home in 4 hours. She would be thinking, why is he so slow? Is he stopping off to watch a football match halfway? Or does he have a secret woman he's visiting? What's he doing? And similarly at work, if you say it's going to take 4 months and they know it's kind of a 2-month job, then you can't get away with that. So unfortunately, we can't have 4 hours. So what does project management theory say? And really, there are 2 things that people do, I think both of which are wrong. And the first one is people add 10%. So they say, well, let's add 10% to the average. I'll put here plus 10%. So what's 10% of 2 hours? Well, it's 12 minutes, isn't it? Because 10% of 1 hour is 6 minutes. So you could add 12 minutes to your journey. But I think a journey that might take as long as 4 hours, I just don't think 12 minutes is enough safety margin. So it depends. I've picked something that has quite a wide variation here. You might have something that has a more narrow variation, and then 12% would be 12 minutes would be enough. But the problem with 10% is it might be enough, it might not, but it depends how variable your project is. So we need to somehow take account of how variable it is. So the second formula, and this is the one that I don't agree with, quite often in books, they quote a thing called the 1-4-1 formula. And you'll see this a lot, the 1-4-1 formula. And what you do, I'm going to show it to you, even though I don't agree with it. And then I'm going to show you what I think you should use instead. Okay. So with the 1-4-1, you take 1 of these, 4 of these, and 1 of these. And then you divide the whole lot by 6. Okay. So we take 1 times 1, which is 1. We take 4 of these. So 4 2s are 8. And then we take 1 of these, which is 4. And we divide the whole lot by 6. So this comes to 13 over 6. So that's 2 1/6, isn't it? 2 1/6. So this fancy formula, the 1-4-1 formula, by the way, have you seen that? I don't know, Achilles and George, have you seen that? It's quite often they trot it out on training courses. But the first problem with this formula is that it's very cautious. We've only added 1/6 of an hour. So we've added 10 minutes. Now that's slightly better. No, in fact, it's worse, isn't it, than the 12 minutes. It's adding less than 10%. So my first problem with this is it's too cautious. But the other problem I have with this is that if you have a symmetrical distribution, it doesn't add anything at all. So if this had been 3 hours, if it had been a 2-hour job, which could take 3, but also we might do in 1, we would have done this formula and we would have said 1 of those plus 4 of those plus 1 of these. And if this was a 3 divided by 6, you could see it just comes to 8, 9, 10, it comes to 12 over 6, which is 2. So this formula would just tell you to not add anything on at all, which is crazy. Because clearly with this project, if we want to be safe, we need to add a safety margin on. Otherwise, I mean, this is giving us an answer that's only 50% reliable because it's giving us the average. So the 1-4-1 formula, people think it's clever or whatever, but it doesn't give a good answer. So I would like to suggest a completely different and much better way to do it. It's actually quicker as well. It's quicker to work it out and it gives you a better answer. What I think you should do is you should go halfway between the average and the worst. Okay, so halfway between 2 and 4 is obviously 3. I'm doing this with nice, easy numbers, but in real life, you might have all kinds of numbers. All right, so if you go halfway between the average and the worst, then you will be 90% safe. And this is because only 10% of your journeys will take more than 3 hours. I don't know if you remember normal distributions and standard deviation from maths at school, but this is 3 standard deviations. So if we go halfway between the average and the worst, this is 1.5 standard deviations. And if you look up 1.5 standard deviations, you'll find that it's, I think it's actually 92%. I think it's actually only 8% of the journeys, but I'm calling it 10 to keep it simple. So only 10% of your journeys are going to be longer than that. So if we go halfway between the average and the worst, we will be 90% safe. We're still going to have 1 project in 10 that is late. So we are going to let the customer down 1 time in 10. But I think most project managers would be delighted if only 1 project in 10 was late. Wouldn't you be delighted? I'd be delighted by that, I must say, actually. So if you can go halfway between, then you'll be 90% safe. So that idea of going halfway is much easier than this 1-4-1, and it gives a better answer because it actually takes into account how widely spread your distribution is, but it gives you a decent amount added on. Now, the way you would actually do that in real life would be as follows. I'm just going to draw it right down in the bottom here because I want to keep this for the second thing I'm going to tell you about. So let's suppose that you're adding up your project, and suppose you've got, various tasks like this. I'll just do it with 4, and maybe there are some non-critical ones down here as well or something. You might have other branches, but suppose this is your critical path, and let's suppose that it's 2, 3, 1, and hang on, 5, 6, and 2. So let's suppose that we've got a plan that's going to take us 8 weeks, right? When we add these up, I'll just try to keep the numbers really easy. 2, 3, 1, and 2. Okay. How would we actually do this idea of mine of going halfway between the average and the worst? Well, the first thing we do is we think, what is the worst for this project? So this task here, how bad might it be if it goes really wrong? And let's say it maybe would take 1 extra week if it goes really badly. And maybe this one would perhaps go by 2 extra weeks if it goes really badly. And maybe this one could, if it goes really badly, could take an extra 2 weeks. It could go from 1 week to 3 weeks. Now, we just have to use our judgment on these, depending on what they are. And maybe let's say that this one here could go late by 1 week, worst case. Okay, so the worst case, if everything goes as bad as it could possibly be, the project from hell, we're going to add on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to add on another 6 weeks. We're going to go from 8 to 14 weeks. Okay, but what I'm saying is we don't want to add on the absolute worst case. It's very, very unlikely that all of the tasks will go completely to their worst possible outcome. What will probably happen is that some of them will go quite badly. Some of them will be fine. Some of them will go a little bit badly. Some of them will go quite badly. So we should add on half of the 6. We should add on actually only 3. And we should tell the customer 8 plus 3, which is 11. Okay, so that's the 8. This is the 14, and we're going halfway between. We're going to tell the customer 11. So adding on half of the worst means that we're going to be 90% safe if we tell the customer 11 weeks rather than 8. So we start with averages, the 2, 3, 1, and 2. They were the averages. And then for each task along the critical path, we just think, how bad could it be if it goes really badly? And then we add on half of that. So the only thing we've got to do now is we've got to add 3 more weeks to here. So what we do is we just hide that in there. So we just make maybe this one into a 5, and this one into a 2 or something like that. We can decide where we want to hide the weeks, and then we tell the customer that's the plan. We could have hidden those 3 anywhere, could have put one on there, and one on there. But wherever we want to hide them, we then say this is the plan. The plan is 2522, comes to 11 weeks. And now we've got a plan that's 90% safe. Now, have we done a bad thing adding on contingency? No, because we're not doing it for ourselves. I'm not adding 3 weeks so that I can finish after 8 and then swing in a hammock drinking beer for 3 weeks. I'd love to do that, but that's not what I'm planning. I know from experience something is going to go wrong somewhere along this plan. So I need a safety margin because I don't want to let down my customer. So I'm actually adding on the safety margin because I care about my customer. I don't want to let my customer down. And then I'm hiding it because I don't want my customer to be worried. If I just put a lump on the end of 3 for contingency, the customer would be saying, what's that? Why have you added that? Don't you know what you're doing? And the answer is, I don't really know what I'm doing because it's a project. It's new, it's difficult, it may go wrong. But I don't want the customer to worry about that. So I've just hidden it in there. So the customer's told 11, 90% reliable, everybody's happy. Okay, so the 141 formula, I think, is rubbish and should never be used. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to tell you about. Hope that makes sense. Does that make sense so far? If anybody wants to ask a question in the chat, by the way, feel free to ask before I go on to the second half. I'm hoping that's all making sense to you there. Yeah, it's a very nice comment from somebody who saw me doing something for the Swiss PMI. Completely different talk that was. Right, I'm going to go on to the second thing now. Now, this second thing is, it's a little bit more tricky. I feel quite strongly about this second one. So I've not actually done a public talk about it before. So it's going to be really interesting to see what you make of it. So this one is about SPI, and SPI stands for Schedule Performance Index. Now, I can't see you all there, but can I ask Achilles and George, do you know about SPI? Have you heard of it? Do you know what it is?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, don't worry, I'm not going to test you in detail about it, but yeah.
Correct.
And the idea of SPI, there's also Cost Performance Index, which we're not going to talk about. So Cost Performance Index is a measure of are we overspending? So like a Cost Performance Index of 1.2 means you're 20% overspent. And Schedule Performance Index is a measure of lateness. So if you've got a Schedule Performance Index of, say, 90%, it means you've only done 90% of what you should have done. You're behind schedule. Sometimes it's called 0.9 instead of 90%. It's the same. So an SPI of 0.9 means you're 10% behind. You've only done 90% instead of 100%. Now, why would we want to measure what we've done compared to what we should have done? And the answer is because we want to work out when we're going to finish. We want to work out when the finish date's going to be, don't we? There's a more subtle reason as well, actually, which is when we're looking at the money we've spent, we also need to look at the schedule performance. Because if we've spent, let's say, 90% of what we expected, we could be saying, this is great, we're under budget. But if we have a quick look at the schedule performance, it might be we've only done 90% of what we should have done as well. And that would explain why we've spent less money, because we've done less. So when we're looking at the money, we need to know where we are on the schedule performance. Okay? But we also need to know it just for when are we going to finish. So a schedule performance index of 0.9 or 90% means we've only done 90% of what we should have done. But now we come to the problem, which is it 90% by value or by time? Because the books all say it's value, but I think it should be time. Okay, and I'm going to show you a real example. I'm going to ask everybody to put in the chat what they think the answer would be. All right, so I'm going to give you a little question to think about here. So imagine that here's a project and it's just 3 tasks. And we're going to do these, let's say we're going to do them in January, February, and March. And we'll just call them A, B, and C. It doesn't matter what they are. Okay, so it's a 3-month project. And I'm going to put the value of these tasks on as well. So this one costs €1,000. This one costs €3,000. And this one costs €1,000. Okay, now why would one task cost 3 times as much? Maybe it's got 3 people doing it. Or maybe we're using gold paint. Who knows? Right, but for whatever reason, 1,000, 3,000, 1,000. So the total of the whole thing is going to cost us 5K. And it's going to take us 3 months. So that's fine, isn't it? So let's imagine it's the end of February. So this is now. And all we've done is A. Okay, we're a bit behind on this project. We haven't done B yet. We haven't even started B. All we've done is A, and it's the end of February. What I want to ask you all, can you all please put in the chat how many months you think the whole project will take? So the whole project is meant to be taking 3. How many months? So don't do the months remaining. Just do how many months in total the whole project. I'm just going to put that there. Okay, so if you could all just put how many months. I think there are 2 right answers, and there's 1 totally wrong answer, which is what the textbooks will tell you. I'm going to show you all that in a minute. How many months for the whole thing? So George has put 4.5. That's a bit weird. Why has he put that? Quite a lot of people putting 5. Yeah, but quite a lot of people, some people putting 6. 3.8. Okay. Nobody's put one of my right answers. Oh, yeah. Pericles. Well done, Pericles. You put 4. Oh, Evdoxia's put 4 or 6. That's a really good answer. 4 or 6. I love that answer. Everyone's going to put 4 or 6 now, aren't they? But no, put your opinion. Put 4. Does anybody think more than 6, by the way? Okay, that's probably enough answers for now. Right. Now, let me tell you why I think Evdoxia is brilliant. I can't actually see Evdoxia, by the way. Is that a... yeah, well, anyway, it's a good name. 4 or 6. And you could put 5 because it's like halfway in between 4 and 6. So the way I see this, right, let me tell you about the answers you could have for this, and then I'll tell you why the textbook is wrong. What will an optimist say? Optimist. The optimist will say, we are 1 month behind. We should have done B, but we haven't. Maybe we started late, or perhaps we had a little problem on A, but now we're going to go back onto our plan. We're going to do B, which takes a month, C, which takes a month. Okay, so basically it's going to take us 2 more months till we finish. So it's going to be 4. right? So the optimist says we're going to be back on plan. We're just 1 month behind, so the 3 becomes 4. Okay, and I think that's a great answer. People like Pericles put that perfectly good. The pessimist is going to say, we've taken 2 months to do something that should have taken 1 month, and that slower speed is going to continue for the rest of the project. So the question really is, are we going to carry on at this slower rate, or are we going to go back onto the plan? So the optimist says back onto the plan. The pessimist says, no, we're going to carry on the slower rate. So this 3-month project is going to take 6 because we're going half speed. It's taken us 2 months to do 1. It's going to take us 6 months to do all 3. Okay. And that concept of it's going to carry on at the same rate, that is really what schedule performance is. Because really, this is looking like a schedule performance of a half, isn't it? We've only done, we've gone at half the speed. It's taken 2 times as long to do A. Because what's happened so far is that A has taken this long, hasn't it? This is A. And then, what's going to happen next? So the schedule performance would say that A has taken twice as long, so the whole thing is going to take twice as long, and that's 6. Okay, so that's easy. But if you look in a book at the definition of schedule performance, you'll find something called earned value. And in fact, I'm going to take a risk now, and I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to do this. I'm a crazy guy. So let's do this. If I go opening the share tray, screen 1. Right, can you see my screen? I expect you can. Let's just look for definition of SPI, and then we're going to from PMI. Let's ask PMI. Right, the schedule performance SPI is a measure of the conformance of actual progress to the planned progress. And can you see it's the earned value over the planned value? And 1 would be we're on target. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Where do I click? Okay, don't panic, Chris. I must be able to click somewhere to stop sharing. Are you guys able to stop me sharing at your end? Yeah, stop me sharing. I can't see anywhere to click. Bring me back. That's bizarre. Oh, there we are. Stop presenting. I got it. Yeah, I had to mouse over it. Am I back now?
Yes. Yeah.
I am back. You can see me, can you? That's really weird.
Yes.
I can't see myself. Oh, I knew it was too risky to do that, but that's okay because we'll just carry on from where we're at. Okay, I'm just going to talk to nothing. Okay, so you remember that definition was the earned value, the actual earned value divided by the planned value. So what they would say, the proper definition of SPI would say, we've done 1,000 euros worth instead of 4,000, because A and B total to 4,000. So they would say, you've only done a quarter of what you should have done. You've only earned a quarter of the value that you should have earned. You see that? We've only done A instead of A and B. So in terms of progress, if you measure progress by value rather than time, we've only done a quarter. So if we carry on at a quarter of the speed, 3 months is going to become 12 months. So if you use the correct value of schedule performance index, it will tell you that this is going to be a 12-month project, which is clearly ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And in fact, we've had 2 months, so there's another 10 months till we finish. What do they think that we're going to do in the remaining 10 months? Because C is exactly the same as A, isn't it? It was basically a 1-month job, and it was going to take 1,000 euros. So that's presumably going to take 2 months now, because we're going to carry on the same. So of the remaining 10 months, 2 are gone. So they think we're going to spend 8 months doing B. And why on earth would this suddenly become 8 times as long? It doesn't make any sense. And clearly this project is not going to take 12 months, is it? I mean, even 6, I think, is a bit pessimistic. So this formula is just wrong. To say that schedule performance is earned value divided by planned value, that is just wrong. And I don't think you should do it by that. I think you should do it by how long it should have taken compared to how long it has actually taken. Should have taken 1 month. It's actually taken 2 months. Therefore, we've got an SPI of 50%, a half, 0.5. Okay. Now, I've exaggerated these numbers so you can really see the difference. And in a lot of projects, you don't notice that you're getting the wrong answer, but you are getting the wrong answer, seems to me. And I don't see why the value makes any difference at all. If I'd made that 3 into a 1, then the SPI would have been 1 out of 2. It would have been a half. Everything would have been fine. So this number, the fact that this is meant to cost €3,000 changes everything. And why should it? Because imagine if this was silver paint and this was gold paint. The only thing we're doing, we're painting. And we're using silver paint, gold paint, silver paint. Why does the type of paint affect when we're going to finish? You know, if it was all silver, 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 the formula would say we're going to finish in 6 months. Whereas if it was silver, gold, silver, the formula says 12 months. Why does this make any difference? And even if this is more because 3 people are going to be doing it, it's still 3 people doing a 1-month task. And if everything goes twice as slow, those 3 people will take 2 months instead of 1 month. So I don't see why the number of people has any effect on how much it enlarges when we start to go slower. So I think the value is completely irrelevant, and this is the wrong formula. So I think you should forget earned value, and you should look at how long things have taken, and you should say, well, this first one has taken 2 months instead of 1. So if we're going to be a pessimist, we're going to say everything is twice, and the answer is 6. If we're going to be an optimist, then we're just 1 month behind. So we'll just add 1 month on the end, and we'll make it 4 rather than 3. And of course, the truth will probably be somewhere in between these 2 numbers. So the truth will probably be about 5. And all the people who guessed 5, I mean, I think that's a pretty reasonable estimate of what's going to happen, because the rest of the project, it probably won't be as bad as the first bit, but it probably won't be as good as our perfect plan. We won't get quite back onto plan. You know, we're probably going to run a bit late on the remainder of the project, aren't we? It's going to be somewhere between 4 and 6. I quite like 5.5, actually. I can't remember whether it was, no, George put 4.5, didn't he? He was quite optimistic. But I think there is an argument to say 5.5, because we've still got quite a lot still to go, and we have done badly so far. But of course, really, the question is why? You know, why did we have a problem on task A? Because if it was a one-off problem and has now been fixed, maybe that was a particular supplier who we don't have anymore, then we can go back to plan. Whereas if it's something that has permanently changed, like, you know, the value of the euro is different or something, I don't know, or maybe we've got the same team and the whole team are just useless, then we're probably going to carry on going slowly, and then it's probably going to be more like the 6. So knowledge of what actually happened allows us to tell whether it's a 4 or a 6. But my point to you is there's no way it's 12. So this formula, which you can Google, and it's on in every project management book in the world except for mine, is wrong. And this example shows it. So there we are. Those were the 2 things I wanted to show you. And I hope that is useful. I hope that makes sense to you there. Does anybody want to make a comment about that? I can see Elias has put, where is it written that if SPI is 0.25, at the time of the project, the program duration is going to be 4 times? It is written, Elias, because the whole purpose of measuring schedule performance is to predict the finish date. So you'll find somewhere on the PMI website, it'll say the duration of the project is the planned duration divided by SPI. So if SPI is a half, then you multiply the whole thing by 2. Yeah, Nicolaus has put it's in PMBOK. It absolutely is in PMBOK. And that's why else would you measure SPI if it wasn't to try to predict when you're going to finish the project? So that is absolutely what they do. And it's wrong. Now, obviously, you have to worry, don't you? When you start thinking the whole world is wrong except for me, you have to think, is it me? But I've thought about this a lot, and I've asked people. Every now and then I meet a project manager at a party, and I drag them off and I say, look, forget the drink and don't look at the dancing. I want to talk to you about SPI. And they go, oh, do we have to? I go, yeah, I really want to. And when I ask them about this, I draw this on a little napkin, and they go, oh, I don't know. Let's just go and have some alcohol. And I've never managed to actually corner a project manager and get the truth. I think one day I might lock someone in my dungeon until they promise they'll talk to me about this, because I really want to know about this. And I'm pretty sure I'm right. And I'm pretty sure the whole world is wrong. So there we are. Spiros has put the God. I'm not a God in any other way, but I'm pretty sure because I think a lot of people get taught this stuff. You know, you go on a project management course and they teach you what they were taught. And when people write a book, they just copy all the other books. And I think people don't stop and think, hang on a minute, is that right? You know, why does the value of this make any difference to the time it's taken? I don't know. So, yeah. Well, I thought Achilles had gone then.
Yeah,
I thought
Chris. No, I'm here.
Had to
Chris,
go and have a cold shower.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that just to share my thoughts, and I hopefully I represent some of my fellow colleagues from the PMI community regarding the SPI. To my mind, at least, it's mainly used as a KPI to just have a report on the current status where I am today, right? I'm not sure if you can generalize and be sure that can say that SPI can work as a tool to project estimation for the future. So if you do that, most probably it can get you to wrong results, but it can work as a formula for what's happening right now, where you're standing. That's my first comment. And for the SPI, not as a projection tool, but as a current status KPI. Regarding the contingency, another question from my side. I see your approach. I understand you're using not the normal distribution. And have you ever confirmed this approach with a 90% safety? I mean that you follow a different approach, but have you actually applied this approach to any project and see that that's working? Because I feel that's the community may need to hear that right now.
Well, I mean, I've been using it for all my projects. To answer the second bit first, this bit about going here, I use it for mine, and I've been teaching it to people for years, and they've all been going, oh yeah, I like that. And it's my LinkedIn learning course. I've got it on there, and nobody's ever said, oh no, we don't like that. But the thing about contingency is there isn't really a rule for what's right or wrong. It's just what you want to ask for. But I think there is a risk that lots of people are adding 10%, or they're using the 141 and they're not adding enough. And then their project turns out to be late because they have a few problems. They didn't add enough contingency. And, we know that a lot of projects, I can't remember the figure, but more than half of projects end up being late. So I think, there is evidence that people don't add enough contingency on. It's just how you work it out. But so I can't prove my method is right, except that it's based on statistics. And there's no doubt that if you go halfway between here and here, it's 1.5 standard deviations, which is 92%. So, probability would say if it's a normal distribution, then this thinking is correct. And things are always a normal distribution. I mean, they always are. And you can prove why. Even if you roll dice, let's suppose you roll 3 or 4 dice, and you add up let's say 4 dice, and you add up the total. The total will be somewhere between 4, if they all roll a 1, and 24. That's 4 6s. So somewhere between 1 and 24. And the average for each dice will be 3.5. So that gives you 14. So 14 will be the middle point. And if you go halfway between 14 and 24, which is 19, you can actually try this with dice. And you just measure how often it takes you longer than 19 weeks. And you'll find it'll only be 10% of the time. It'll be quite rare that you throw more than 19. How often do you throw 20 or more when you're throwing 4 dice? So you could try it just with 4 dice, because all a project is really is a multi-factor thing. It's got lots of variables, and we're just trying to work out how many of these are likely to go wrong. You know, are they all? This down here is like all of my dice rolling a 5 or a 6, and it's quite unlikely actually. In fact, you could work it out, couldn't you? Because the chance of getting a 5 or a 6 is 2 out of 6, which is a third, and the chance of all 4 of them being like that is a third times a third times a third times a third, which is 1 in 81. So it's actually, yes, so it's lower than 5%. It's 1 in 81. It's almost 1%. Did that make sense? So there is definite maths behind that. I want to go back to what you said about this though, and if you use the wrong formula for schedule performance index, if you're only looking at where you are now and you're not using it to predict anything, then you could argue it doesn't really matter. You're just wrongly thinking. So these people are really depressed because they've only done a quarter. Whereas I'm thinking, well, actually, I've done a half. But it doesn't matter what we're thinking. The only thing that matters is when you calculate the finish date, what do you say to your customer? So what's in your head doesn't really matter. It's what comes out of that. But if you're saying to the customer, this is now going to take 12 months, you know, that's ridiculous and wrong. So you're right. You could just use it. You could use the conventional formula just for saying where you're at. But who cares where we're at? Why would you want to even know that number? It's only useful if you're going to predict where you're going to finish. And that's when it has to be right. Nikolaos has put an interesting comment. He's put the examples used to teach SPI are not set in a way that will demonstrate this variance. And he's right, because if you have a very linear project, if this had just been 1, 1, 1, or 1, you know, 1.2 and 1.1 or something, if the values are very similar, you won't really notice the difference. But if it's something quite expensive that you haven't done, then suddenly the difference will become clear. But you're right, if you teach it using a pretty linear project, then you won't notice the difference. But I would ask you, how linear are real projects? And the answer is not at all linear. You know, real projects are all over the place. And so you've got to be really careful, I think, about using the value-based approach on a real project. And yeah, so somebody with a Greek name I can't read, but it begins with D. He's put, we use SPI and CPI for KPI reasons, just that. And yeah, you could, but why are you measuring those KPIs? And obviously you want to know, are we ahead or behind? That's great. And you might want to know how ahead or how behind are we? That's great. But what you really want to know is a forecast of when you're going to finish. And that's when you might get into trouble, I think. So measuring the health of the project, but you're measuring the health of your project wrongly. You just don't know, but you are. So, but my method is easy. You know, I mean, I think the formula of just saying how long has it taken compared to how long it should have taken is just as easy to work out. So I'm not asking you to do anything difficult. I'm just asking you to do something that's right.
Yeah, so I would ask Chris, or our participants here, feel free to share your comments just to have this beautiful debate right now, because you know we're not used to challenging our methods that we're using, right? And your statement is quite radical right now, and we are happy. Please share your thoughts, and that's a beautiful topic to discuss. So if you have any comments, feel free to share your thoughts here with Chris and the other participants.
I want to see this. Yeah. OMG, so, he's right. That's what I want someone to put. Yeah. But I don't know, maybe I'm going mad. I mean, maybe, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but everyone I've ever showed, they've all gone, oh yeah, see what you mean, Chris.
We have a question from Mr. Kelaididis.
Oh yeah. How would you apply this when you've got hundreds of activities? Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because with the money, you can just add up the money earned on all those activities, can't you? I think all you can do with the progress, this is not a great answer, I admit, and you know, maybe you found the flaw. If you've got, I mean, I would use the critical path to know where I am. So I'm going to draw a tiny little Gantt chart down in the corner. Can you see it just about? I don't want to rub anything out because I want to take a picture of this and send it to you afterwards. But suppose you've got a Gantt chart like this. And then you've got some floating tasks. right? And then suppose the now line is here. And suppose that we've done these three. And we've done this one and this one and this one. Can you see that down there in the corner just about? Is that okay? The question is, where do we put the progress line? Because if we just take the critical path, it's quite easy. We can say we're here. And by the way, you might have done half a task on the critical path. That's still fine. We can say we're here. And then we can compare. It's taken us, we've done this much when we should have done this much. We could just compare those distances, and that will give you my schedule performance index. So, it's taken us 10 weeks and it should have only taken us 9 weeks or whatever. Well, or this is 9 weeks of work and it's actually taken us 10 weeks so far to do it. So you could get the SPI from that. But it gets more complicated when you've got tasks down here. So maybe we've got a task here that we're ahead, and we've got some other tasks that we're behind. And so you could do a sort of average line of where you're up to. But I think the critical path is the thing that really defines when you're going to finish. So I think I would just take a line of where are we up to on the critical path? How long has it taken us to do that much work? So how long should it have taken? How long has it actually taken? And the ratio of the green to the red is how I would work it out, even if I had lots of tasks going on. And I think, that's better than adding up the value of everything we've done. Because, of course, if you're talking about cost, you need to look at the value of everything you've done. But if you're looking at progress, the value of these floating tasks don't really matter. In terms of progress, in terms of when are we going to finish, it's all about the critical path, isn't it? Unless things have got so bad that the floating tasks are going to make us finish late, which could happen. So that's how I would work it out. I would just focus on the critical path and I would look at how long that has taken. I hope that's a good answer. Oh, it says see more. What else are people putting? Yes. You need to see the critical path. I agree with Spiros. You may have low SPI and zero delay on the critical path. Yeah, exactly. It's all about the critical path, isn't it? In which case, progress is not too difficult. But for cost performance, absolutely, you should look at the value that you've actually spent compared to the value you plan to spend. And I think people try to use the same data for both cost and schedule. And I think that's lazy and wrong, but I think that I can see why they would want to use the same data. And of course, accountants don't understand critical paths. Accountants probably can't even see a Gantt chart. So accountants are just looking at the money that's been spent compared to the money that should have been spent. And that's all they've got. But then it shouldn't be an accountant who's working out this. This should be the project manager, because the project manager is the only one who knows why A was late. So when you're forecasting the 4 or the 6, that needs to be done by the project manager, not by an accountant who doesn't understand project management. I'm sure you're all going to agree with that, since you're all PMI project managers. Anyway, it's almost time to finish, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So I hope if you know nothing about project management, that you found it interesting and useful. And I hope if you know quite a lot, that it's just tickled your brain a little bit and given you something to think about. I hope. Maybe even made you smile occasionally.
Okay. From our side, we would like to thank you, Mr. Croft, for being with us today and for giving us a different perspective to think about. And also, we would like to thank our audience to be here. And we hope that we will see you again in the future with us, Mr. Croft.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Follow me on LinkedIn as well, by the way. Just put Chris Croft into LinkedIn. I'm posting things all the time on LinkedIn, sometimes project management, sometimes other things, but it's all useful. So maybe I'll see you there. You can send me messages on LinkedIn and things if you want as well. I always like that.
We will, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye. Take care. Thank
you
so
much.
much.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I'm looking at the goodbye messages from people. Thank you, everyone. It's nice to know that you liked it. I think you did.